done texturing all these assets that I've provided for you. Now we can go on to rendering and adding some texture. I mean rendering and adding lighting to your scene. So right now we have this icon right here, which is your light, the only light in the scene. But if you wanted to add more light to it, or just add more, fine-tune your scene according to the light, you can definitely do that. So what you can do, there's various ways. You can either duplicate this light, which is Control D, and just create another light. I'll undo that, or you can click on Add, Add, and you want to have your light. So there's 4 main lights. So you have a point light, sunlight, spotlight, and area light. So what I want you to do is just explore the different types of light. So what I'll just quickly do is add a light here. I just duplicated that light, and I'm just going to the top view and just moving it somewhere close to the concrete ball, just so I know that I'm focusing on one light and I can see what impact is being had. I'm going to switch off the other light so I know that this is the light that I'll be working with. Alright, on the settings, you now have this light bulb which has just popped up, and here you can still change into the different types of lights that you want to use. So you have the power, which you go all the way up, which is in watts, so that's how strong your light can be. The specular, you can just leave it as it is. Then you have the radius, so the radius will impact how soft your shadows, the shadows are in your scene. So if I just undo that, move that all the way down to the bottom, so you can probably have a better idea. So if I increase the radius, it softens out the shadows that are in my scene. So you can just custom that to something that is more ideal for you. Alright, so we have that. The color, self-explanatory. If you want to change the color of the scene or the color of the light, you can have that, and the color automatically gets updated. Alright, so I'll just duplicate that light, move it across, which is just Control D. I'll hide the previous light, probably change the color as well into something a little bit different. These are extreme colors at the moment, but I'm just doing it so you guys can see the different variations. Then we want to change it to a sunlight. So you have the sunlight, which is usually you would expect the sunlight to be like the world light, as the word is suggesting, it's the sun. So this illuminates the whole scene. So usually you'd just get into find the right value that would work for your scene, depending on how big or small your scene is. You can fine-tune the values. So maybe if for this scene I can even go down to 10. It does give me an overall view, or it does light illuminate the whole scene quite nicely. With sunlight, it doesn't really matter about the position of the actual light. The more important thing is the angle. So the angle, obviously, it gives you different, it casts shadows from different directions. Or you can use the rotate. So yeah, so you can also rotate it. So that's how you would kind of manipulate or use the sunlight. So it doesn't really matter how close it is to an object. It doesn't get brighter or darker. It's a linear light which is shined just straight through. It doesn't degrade or decompose or starts to lose its intensity. Alright, I'll duplicate that light again, go on to the next one. I'll hide my previous light there, and we'll go into the spotlight. So you have a spotlight which is almost as if this is like a directional light. So if you want to specifically have a direction to where the light is coming from, or it's looking at a particular object, then you have this, and it's not just dispersing around, it's kind of confined to this circle. So I'll just increase that to probably 500. That's still very bright. Let me say 9,000. Alright. So as you can see, it does cast a shadow where the light is not, if you're not pointing towards it, the shadow would be cast. So anything outside this perimeter is more in shadows. Power is still the same. Your radius is also affecting the smoothness of the actual casting shadows. And you can actually change the size as well by using your spotlight shape. Alright, you can soften out your shadow by moving out or moving in and out or like an inner ring as well, so it just kind of tapers it, so it kind of slowly fades out the light as well. So yeah, so you can go from that option. You can play around with those settings as well. As with all the other lights, you can also change the light color. Let me duplicate that one more time. I'll hide that one, and we want to go into the area light. So an area light it's almost another version of a spotlight, or even another version of a spotlight, because it just gives you a larger radius. So let me just quickly add an area light from here actually. Yeah, okay, cool. So it's a similar version of a spotlight, but it just gives you a larger surface area. So if I change the voltage to 9,000, directional as well, but if I move that a little bit down, you'll see that it forms almost like a square grid because the surface is a bit wider, so you have this hard line there. So yeah, so obviously if you wanted to create a good strong highlight on an object and you don't want to just use a spotlight which does tape off, you can use an area light. This gives you an option to customize it, so if you wanted to scale it, let me say scale it on different axes, you can. It gives you a different look, different style. You have the size as well that you can manipulate. The larger the size, it does soften your shadows. And of course you still have your colors. You can change your colors. Alright, so you've gone through all 4 different lightings, which is the main lighting. Of course we haven't gone into emitting creating emissions from an object, so that'll be for a different tutorial, but for now you just have the basics for lighting. Now that you've got that, you can go under your render properties, which is this icon down here. Then we did speak about the 2 rendering times. You have your Eevee renderer, which is your real-time render, which is actually what we're looking at right now. It's rendering out in real time. So if I have to click on F12, you'll see that it'll load up and we'll have our image rendered out at the same time. So this is why did I render that out? Because I am recording it, so it's gonna take long for it to render. Okay, now I just have to wait for that. Okay, so did it actually create a... Oh yeah, it actually rendered out. So yeah, I just have that render, which is cool. Alright. But you can always change to cycles, which is using a ray trace. So this is more of the realistic, it's like real-time render. So obviously you see that it has all these these samples, these dots. So basically, it's calculating the shadows um, as it counts down or counts down from 32 samples. So the higher the samples, the more finer these lines will be. So it'll be appear more smoother, less grainy. But obviously it takes a little bit more time, and also it does require more. The higher you go, the more chances of it you might crash your computer, which I know I have done that. So when you look at the viewports or even the render, you can just customize it down there. But to be honest, you can keep it as it is. Some computers have a designated GPU, so that's just your graphics card. You can change that, assign your graphics card. It'll instead of using the CPU's graphics, it can use your dedicated graphics card. So this would kind of run a little bit more smoother. So we'll just send it back to Eevee because that is quite time friendly. Obviously, you just need a little bit more optimization in the darker areas down here, creating some rims and lighting effects. Alright, so that's a good overview of your render, your Eevee, and cycle renders. And you have an overview of your animation. The last thing that I actually didn't mention was the shadows. You can always have, you can on these shadows are usually only available for on Eevee. On cycles, I don't think you'll have shadows. Let me double check it. Because it actually calculates it in real life, no, in real time. I mean, so let me go to Eevee, go back into the light, shadows, and so contact shadows is what I would recommend because you have a little bit more customization when it comes to your contact shadows. Let me contact shadows active. Yeah, there you go. So shadows, contact shadows. So you can adjust your thickness of the shadows. You can just play around with these settings, the distance, to see what suits you a little bit more. But that's available on all these other lights. So on your point lights, you just need to activate. So usually you have the default shadows, but if you want to have more customization, just make sure contact shadows is activated. Alright, so I'll let you guys get on with that, and